Here's a game that has been around the blocks for a few years, but still seems very popular amongst people who like trick-taking games. Skull King by Schmidt Spiele does a few things differently to other trick-taking games, which is why it's so much fun, and a game that you can teach to people who are new to trick-taking games. Yet, there is as much depth in this game as there is in other trick-taking games. The first thing you notice about Skull King is that players only get dealt one card in the first round, which means you can slowly ease yourself into this game, and there is very little you have to consider at the beginning. In each subsequent round, the number of cards goes up by 1, so the round number is the number of cards you get dealt. That matters because at the beginning of each round, everyone, all at the same time, needs to say how many tricks they think they will win. If you only have one card in your hand, that's easy, but as the number of cards increases, you have to think a bit more. The next point of difference in Skull King is that even though there's a trump suit, there's an additional hierarchy of cards, but even that hierarchy isn't linear. So even though there's a card that's technically the highest trump, the Skull King himself, that card can actually get trumped by another card, Mermaid, which itself is lower than other pirate cards though. Other trump cards are equal to each other, but whoever played the last of those cards the trick wins it. It all seems very complicated, but there's a wonderful illustration in the rulebook that visualizes what trumps what, so you don't get confused. Yes, it's exactly the fact that different cards have different strengths depending on what else was played, combined with how your hand size increases from round to round, which makes Skull King so interesting and fun. Deciding how many tricks you like to get in each round becomes more and more difficult. At the same time, Skull King feels very much like other trick-taking games, so you will feel right at home if you're familiar with other games from the genre. A lot of the strategies you would use in other trick-taking games apply here as well, so the order in which you play your hand will be important if you're trying to draw out other players' strong cards, allowing you to win a trick with a lower card later on. There isn't much more to say about Skull King really. It's a deck of cards which packs a big punch and creates a lot of fun and laughter, as players are pitted against each other to predict the number of tricks they will win, while others try and foil them, but at the same time ensuring they meet their own prediction. It's definitely a game worth taking a closer look. Thank you for listening to this Tabletop Games blog review. There's also a written version of it on my blog, links in the description of this podcast. There you'll also find links to my Ko-fi and Patreon pages if you want to support me financially. Please also like this podcast and subscribe to it. Leave some stars if you're an Apple Podcast. Everything would be really welcome. And review it if you can as well. Other than that, tell your friends about it, and generally I hope you join me again for another episode of Tabletop Games Blog Review. Thanks for listening, and bye! This podcast was made possible by my Patreon supporters, David Miller of Subquad Publishing, James Naylor of Naylor Games, Paul Grogan of Gaming Rules, Robin Kay of Ruined Sky Games, Sarah Reed of Undine Studios, Tim Vernick, and Richard Simpson of We're Not Wizards.